Alright, so today's section, what we're going to be discussing is a case study example. So in the previous two sections, we looked a little bit at kind of some of the theory behind the lean problem-solving approach. And in this section, we're actually going to kind of put that to the test. And we're going to work through a little bit of a case study just to give everybody an opportunity to kind of see what this looks like when you apply it in a real-world kind of hands-on setting. Generally, that helps a little bit to kind of see how you use some of these techniques and how it applies kind of in real life, which is the goal of what we're trying to do. So for this, there's actually a couple documents that we're going to use for this one, so it's a little bit different. The first one is the case study itself. It's available right off the site. Go ahead and download it. You can use it on the computer or print it. There's also a sample containment plan, breakdown pages that we'll use as we work through this case study, and then the last thing is a sample large kind of composite A3 document that we'll also use during this as well. So as we go through this case study, there'll be a couple steps that we'll follow. The first one is we're going to develop a containment plan. Then we're going to use those breakdown pages as kind of a step-by-step practice of the problem-solving method that we discussed in some of the earlier sections. Use the pages just because it's a little bit more simple. You can take it step by step. It's not quite so overwhelming to try and do everything at once. And then it's also nice because it gives us an opportunity at each step to confirm that we understand and that we're thinking about things the right way. Then the last thing we'll hit at in terms of the documentation in the case study example is how we can use then those breakdown pages and kind of put everything together in a cohesive format with that A3 document. And then the very last thing is we'll just have a quick review kind of on the basic thinking behind problem solving as a summary for everything that we've done in these first couple problem solving sections. So go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and open up the case study, read the first section. It's the first couple pages there. Stop where you're instructed to stop, and then when we come back, we'll actually take what we've read and complete a sample containment plan. So we'll assume that you read and stopped. You can try to fill out the containment plan on your own. It's good practice, good exercise, good learning opportunity. If not, we'll kind of walk through. And what this is just a sample. It's an example. So there's some key information on this document and in the others that's important, but the way it's presented, how it's actually used and incorporated into kind of the existing systems in an organization is up to you entirely. As long as you can maintain the kind of the key ideas, the rest is flexible. And we always encourage people to tailor it to what works the best for your particular application. So for this case study, just working through off the containment plan template, the first thing we would do if we were setting one of these up, as they did in that case study, is you're going to go ahead and fill out your name, date, job title, just basic information, just who is working on this. And then the first thing we want to do in containment is we want to start where the problem was first identified. And in this case, it was reported at the customer's facility. Then we want to give a brief description about what the issue was. And then this is really the bulk of the containment plan. The first thing is the containment action. So at the customer's facility, what are we going to do to contain that problem right there? So this is what they decided to do in the case study. Then the next thing is we always want to make sure we assign it to someone for accountability, right? Then we want to give a target to complete, so we create an expectation about what we expect and something we can check up on and follow through to make sure it's done right. And then that's where that complete date comes in. We want to actually follow through and make sure that we're doing this stuff. Then once you've put in a containment plan there, you want to follow the process back upstream. So the next one, wherever that procedure, item, good, whatever it was, came from, you want to go there to see if there's any defects there as well. In the case of our example here, that was the shipping area. Was the problem present? Yes, it was. So we want to go ahead and come up with what the containment actions are going to be to catch it and fix it in that area, who we're going to assign it to, and then a target to complete. Always want to set targets, always want to assign, so we have ownership and accountability. And we want to follow through and make sure that we're actually doing that work. Walk it back upstream again. This is pretty straightforward, just kind of iterative process. We're just walking it back up the line. Anywhere we find defects, we want to go ahead and put a containment plan in place to fix it. So you keep going. Next one is cabinet. Same thing, it was there. They put their containment plan in place, moved on, walked it back, and then finally they got to the well department, and the defect was not present there. So in terms of our containment plan, once you walk it back to the point where the defects are no longer present, We consider that the problem is contained. We've got short-term temporary fixes in place so that we're not continuing to ship bad product while we work on the permanent solutions. So we want to make sure that we get that under wraps first before we do anything else. So having done that, then we'll work right into the problem solving to actually put a permanent solution in, find the real root cause, and let's get this thing solved for good. So the first step for that is we're going to clarify the problem. Step one, we'll read the next section in the case study, stop where it's instructed, and then we'll pick up with the first page and the breakdown pages. And pulling page one up, first thing we want to do is the general problem. Let's go ahead and throw that in there. In this case, it's the chambers not meeting the customer's requirements. And then the very first step we want to do is we want to set an overall goal. Now again, these are all templates. You can change it. It's flexible. In the case of the example, the 5 different overall goals are on-time delivery, safety, efficiency, quality, and sales. And the reason we want to pick one of those is because right off the bat, especially if we're working in teams or other people are going to be involved, we really just want to get everyone on the same page in terms of what type of problem we're dealing with here. Because I think everyone has had experiences where a group of people can be working on the same problem. But say, for example, if I think it's a quality problem and you think it's an efficiency problem, the questions we're going to ask, the solutions we think of, the things we're going to investigate are going to be very different. And it's hard to reconcile that further down into the process. So we really just want to get everyone on the same page from the get-go to make sure we can move forward as smoothly as possible. So in this case, this is pretty much a quality problem. Now you can make the argument that it could be all 5, it could be 2 or 3 or 4 out of the 5, but we really want to just try and pick one so that we can focus on it and move forward with it. So after we've selected that, then we want to go ahead and give a brief description for how this problem affects the overall goal. More or less, this is our justification for why we think it is a quality problem. So if anyone looks at this, or we're giving a report out, or we're working with some other people, they understand our thinking here. And after that now, we want to go ahead and give the ideal situation for this problem. So what would a perfect solution to this be in a perfect world? In this case, we would want to make sure that all the chambers we ship meet the customer specifications, right? 0 defect rate. That's our ideal. So we want to compare that to what our actual current situation is. So we want to understand, well, what's perfect, and then where are we right now? Now this is a little bit interesting right here because this is a little bit of an art versus just a specific science in terms of how we describe the current situation. For here in the example, we threw in for over the past 3 months there's been an average of 5.3 chambers per month that don't meet that requirement. Now that came from that bar chart that they found in the data, but what you'll find is that data goes back quite a ways. So we could have described this in terms of what happened last month, or an average over 6 months, or an average over a year. So when you have that, just like that description we gave before for why we think it was a quality problem, we can use the notes sections to add in a little bit more information. So here we can see that the trend was relatively stable over the last 6 months. So that's why we focused on the last 3, because the previous 6 were stable, and in the last 3 we actually saw some escalation. And then just in the very last month, there were 7 chambers. So it looked like the problem had been getting worse recently. Now, as a general rule of thumb, when we're describing the current situation, we really want to focus on right now. We don't want to use a lot of year-old data or year average data. We want to know what our real condition is in real time, current condition. So, if we were able to collect data, or if we shipped enough product to say, well, what was it last hour? That would be fantastic, because then you don't have to wait a whole nother month to get your data in. You can just wait another hour and see if your solutions have worked. So that's why it's important to focus on the right here and now, if it's possible. So once you've described your current situation, you know your ideal situation, the difference between the two gives us our gap. And that gap now is the quantitative problem that we're trying to solve. So in just doing this, with that gap, we've taken that kind of general vague pie in the sky problem of chambers not meeting customer specifications, and we've actually been able to narrow it down into something tangible. 5.3 per month are not meeting specifications. We can do something to fix that 5.3 per month a whole lot easier than we can try to do something to fix they just don't meet specifications. And that's the real goal of clarifying that problem, to get that quantitative gap that we want to work with, because that's the problem we're going to solve. And once we have that, then we can move on to the second step, breaking down that problem. And again, these are all taken from the previous section, these steps. So we'll read the next section of the case study, stop again, and then we'll pull up that second page and keep working. And pulling it up. What we want to do now is, now that we understand our gap, we want to break that gap down. We can have some brainstorming activity. We want to go out on the floor. We want to observe something in process, start asking some questions. And what we really want to understand here is all the possible things that could contribute to that gap. The who, what, where, why, when, man, material, method, machine, all the different things that are contributing to causing that problem. We want to flesh them out, and we want to go investigate them. And so in terms of the case study, they found that incorrect prints being supplied, human error, issues with programming, maybe team members aren't following the job documents. They also found not using the correct manufacturing standards, and then also maybe the wrong parts being included in the kits. So once you've got your list, now it's time to go and see and investigate and see what's really happening and what's maybe not a problem. So that's what they did, and then once you're doing that, you can go through and you can start crossing these things off your list that aren't actually happening or aren't actually contributing to the problem in a substantial way. And the goal is you want to try and whittle this list down to maybe one or two real things that are the kind of the big fish here. And when we get those, now we want to break that down further. Let's understand what's really going on with this little subset of the problem. In the case of the case study, when they broke that out, they found, well, the job documents that they have, they've got the engineering prints that they're not following, and they've got the material lists that they're not following. Now at this point, you've got two different problems. How do we know which one we actually want to do something about? Because in one-by-one problem solving, we can't solve every little piece of this problem all at once. That's too difficult. It's hard to keep track. You can't tell if your solutions are working or making it worse because you're changing so much at once. So we really want to break it all down and find the biggest piece of the problem that we can get, and that's what we want to solve first. So in this case, they used some data going back to try and prioritize between these two to see what the bigger piece was, what the bigger chunk was that they could go after. And what they found was that the engineering prints actually were contributing a higher percentage of the defects than the material lists. So they prioritized that problem to fix first, right? We want to go after the biggest piece first. So then once you've got that prioritized problem, we can keep moving forward. We can finish breaking the problem down and we can set our targets. So that's the next section's reading, and then we'll go ahead and pull up that third page after that. So now for page 3, it actually continues the tail end, the end of step 2 there, and then also step 3, setting the target down in the corner. So what we want to do is, once we have broken down our problem and we've got that prioritized piece, right? That prioritized piece should be some process that we can go observe, something that we're doing. And then what we want to do is we want to go and see that process, and we want to break out the individual steps of that process and detail what that looks like. So in the case study, they were able to find using those prints to put a port in. So the steps for that process was getting the prints, marking the location, drilling the pilot hole, cutting the ports, centering it, drilling the rivet holes, and then installing the port. That was what they did. And the reason we want to do this is now we want to try and find the particular step within that process where the defect is coming from. And in the case study, it was when they were going to mark the port for the print. They weren't using the prints quite right. And so once we've identified that step, now we can say what that cause of the general problem is there. And in this case, it was not following the prints correctly when they marked those dimensions. And so what we've done in step 2 is we took that gap, we tried to find all the things that were contributing to the gap. Then we went and investigated, and we crossed off our ideas that weren't really that big of a deal or weren't contributing that much. We kind of found the one or two big fish. We investigated those further to see what was going into making those, and we whittled it down into maybe one or two, in this case 2, problems that were real. We prioritized the big problem, which was the not following prints process. We observed what they actually do with those prints and found the specific step where the defect was occurring. So we whittled that whole big vague problem of just chambers not meeting customer specs. We whittled it down to a gap. We broke that gap down. We found the process. Then we found the step in the process, and we took that big problem all the way down to our team members aren't following the prints correctly when they're marking dimensions during assembly. that is something we can fix. That's tangible. We can get our hands around it. We can do something about that. Now, it's very important in this step too. When we get to the cause of the general problem, we need to look at that and say, well, if I fix that problem, will it help me close my gap? Because we want to make sure that we didn't get lost in the weeds during this problem breakdown. It happens all the time. So in this case, if we fix this not following the prints, will that help that 5.3 chambers that were wrong going out the door every month? In this case, yes, it does. So we know we're on the right track. We can go forward with setting our target. And essentially all the target is it's what do we expect to accomplish if we fix that little cause of the general problem there. And in this case, if we fix that issue 100% with the prints, we expect to reduce the defect rate by 53%, and in 1 month. Now, where does that 53% come from? Why isn't reduced the defect rate 100%? Well, if we go back to the data, remember when they prioritized between the engineering drawings and the material lists, the engineering drawings were only 53% of the problem, not the whole problem. So you can't solve the whole problem by only fixing a piece of it. So it's important that our target is realistic, because that's what we're going to use to judge our success from down the road. So we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot here. It's also important that a target includes by how much, that 53%, and by when, because we want to give some expectations on when this is going to be done. In this case, it's 1 month, because that's what the customer had given the sample company in the case study to get this done by. A lot of times you may not have a deadline handed to you, so we have to pick a deadline that's a reasonable expectation for when we could get this done. So once we've set our target, now we need to start into our root cause analysis, which is step 4, figuring out why this problem that we've broken down, why is that happening. So we'll read the next section, we'll stop again, and then we'll pull up the next page and go through that. And pulling up page 4. First thing we're going to do here is we're going to fill in that cause of the general problem, our result from step 2. And now we want to ask ourselves why. Same thing, brainstorming, investigating, why is this problem happening? And we want to break it down, all the possible reasons why. And then just like step 2, we want to investigate. And the things that don't pan out, we want to go ahead and cross off our list. Then the ones that do, we want to investigate further. 5 whys, drill this all the way down. So we'll ask why again, fill it out again, and again all the information here is just pulled right out of the case study. So in this case, it was team members being interrupted during the job. When they investigated, they found out that was happening, so they asked, why is that happening? Well, they had to shift a workload, they ran out of parts, they were stopping working to help other people. Okay, well, let's investigate that. And we found that shifting the workload and running out of parts wasn't really that big of a factor, but stop working to help other people was. So why are they doing that? Let's take it a step further. Well, it's helping to assist with 2-person jobs, driving the fork truck, and helping people read prints. Okay, well, let's take a look at those. Which ones of those are real? And in this case, the only one that really panned out was when people were interrupted to go help other people on a 2-person job, or a job that required 2 people. Said, okay, great. Well, we could go on from there, but if we look back over, we left one little branch of this tree unexplored, and we don't want to do that. So we want to make sure we get to the root of everything. So we'll take a look at why those prints aren't clear, because that was a problem when they looked at it. Well, they found out there's too much detail. Okay, well, why is that happening? Well, they found that there's no standard for how to create the prints. And now here, just like in step 2, we've got 2 different options. So we got to prioritize between them. In the case study now, they prioritized doing something about their team members being pulled off jobs to help somebody else. Now, why did they do that? In the case study, the area manager realized that he doesn't have control of making engineering new rules and standards. So he passed that off to the engineering manager, the person that had scope of control, to do something about it, and instead focused on what he did have control over, which was what his own team members were doing. So once you've gotten that all the way broken down and you've done your root cause analysis, we want to go ahead and say, well, what is the root cause here? And in the case study, just like we were talking about, it's the team members being interrupted is preventing them from being able to properly follow their own prints. They go help somebody else, they come back, they're lost, they don't know where they were, and they make a mistake. So now, just like at the end of step 2 and at step 3, we want to look here. Now, does this root cause relate to that results of step 2? And in this case, yes, it does. We want to double check though, because maybe we got off in the weeds here, and before we solve a problem that we don't really have, we just want to make sure that we're on the right track again. So after we've got our root cause, we're ready to move on and start developing countermeasures for it. This is where we first get into how are we going to fix this? What are our solutions? So that's the next section. And after the stop, then we'll pull it up and we'll take a look at how we do that. And pulling up page 5. So we want to brainstorm all of our countermeasures, either us individually, if we're working in a team, as a group, whatever we want to do. No idea is too crazy. We want to consider all of our options and go ahead and list them out. And these are the ones just copied right out of the case study. Now the thing that's a little bit different here is we don't want to just arbitrarily pick one from the list, or we don't want to just pick the countermeasure that was somebody's favorite. We want to actually be objective and honest about how we evaluate these against each other to see which one is the best. Because we don't want to do all of these. Maybe some of them really aren't that good of an idea, or they're just not that practical, or they're too expensive. Well, we need to have a good way to figure out what's the best ones to try and pursue. Because just like in step 2, we can't do everything at once. So we want to find the best and focus our energy on that. And that's where kind of this matrix comes in and how we fill it out. So the key up there, the red X is poor, triangle is moderate, circle is good. It's just a simple way to describe how each countermeasure kind of fits these categories. And again, this is a template. So the categories for expected results, how well do we think it'll solve the problem, cost, is it feasible or not, will it have negative side effects, those are just samples. I encourage everybody to change it for what best suits their organization in terms of your evaluation criteria. So once you have that, you laid out, now we can start evaluating. So for the first one, do we think that breaking up the work will have good results in terms of fixing the issue of making mistakes reading prints? In this case, yes. Do we think the better coordination would be good? Absolutely. Now what about having the team members go find a group leader? Well, maybe not so much. They've got to go, they could be gone for 20 minutes trying to find him. Same thing about having the group leader inspect the completed job. Yeah, good results. You've got an extra double check in there. Can't hurt. Now, additional team member? Sure, adding more people, always helps in terms of being able to have another pair of hands. And then having the only specific people jobs. Well, that's a maybe, that's a maybe not. What happens if that person is sick that day? Then who does it? So then you can move on to the next one. You can go through and evaluate these for cost. Well, better coordination, maybe you've got to do some different scheduling thing. You got to buy some more equipment to manage people's times. Could be more expensive. Same things for having team member find the group leaders. Now stopping everything to have an inspection, yeah, it could cost a lot because that's someone's time. Same thing for hiring a new person. Same thing for having someone, only specific people doing it. Then when you look at feasibility, same thing, the good, medium, poor. You can just work right through these and evaluate these again on your own, being honest, or as a group, as a discussion. It's a good way to be objective so that we make sure we're following the right path here. And then you work through just the side effect ones again. Do we think you'll have a negative side effect, a positive side effect? Like in this case, adding an additional team member. Yeah, that'll have positive side effects because now there's an extra person that can help with other things outside of just this problem, right? So once we've kind of filled out everything, now we want to give them an overall evaluation. And that overall evaluation is really just kind of an average of the scores from everything else, and this is what we use to rank them. So when we do that, you can see that 2 of them came out with pretty good overall evaluations. The rest of them, didn't score as high. So the 2 top scores we looked at in the case study, they said, yeah, okay, I think we want to pursue those. And then the last thing you do, always, is we want to assign it to someone. Give someone ownership so we've got some accountability to do something with this. But again, kind of the key thought here is we had 6 ideas. We could have pursued all 6 of them, but the bottom 4 weren't really that great. So we would have spent a lot of time and resources on it and really wouldn't have gotten any results out of it. So the value in this is making sure that we're just focused on doing effective solutions. And now that we know what we want to do, now we have to actually implement those countermeasures, because it's one thing to say I have a great idea, we should do this. It's another thing to actually follow through and do it. So that's what's covered in the next section. Another reading, just stop where indicated, and then we'll pull up the next page and keep working. And pulling up page 6. And this is a template for kind of a countermeasure implementation plan. Again, like the containment plan, change it however you like, whatever suits you, but there's a couple key bits of information on it that it's important to keep. The first one is, just like the containment plan, we want to actually have our implementation plan activity. What steps do we need to accomplish to put all these countermeasures into place? So once we get the steps out, the next important thing is, okay, who's actually going to do these steps? Who's going to be responsible for this? That's the accountability part, the ownership part on the back end. And then the last thing is, we want to set our target dates. That's going in up at the top, right? The by how much, the by when part, that's what we need. So we need what we're going to do, who's going to do it, and when they need to have it done by. Those are the key elements that need to go into any good implementation plan. Then after that, you can just use this document as a living document, so you can track your progress. How are we coming? Are we meeting our obligations? Are we ahead? Are we behind? You can see status, you can see schedule. This is great for supervisors. You can see how your team members are doing and make sure you're staying on top of everything. And so you really just want to follow that all the way through. And then once you've got your once you've got your implementation plan complete and you've got your countermeasures in place, the next step then is we want to monitor our results and make sure that we actually solve this problem. So that's what's covered in the next reading section. We'll go ahead and stop, and then we'll pull up that next page when we get back. And pulling it up, this is what the results section looks like. So again, a couple key bits of information. Everything else is flexible. The first thing we want is, what are the results that we're actually looking for? And then from the case study, what we want to do is we want to check that we reduce the number of chambers that we shipped that had defects, that weren't meeting the customer's requirements, right? That was the whole reason we did this, was to get that 5.3 a month down as low as possible. So we know what we want, what we're checking for. We want to give ourselves a date for when we're going to check for it. That 1 month, again, comes from the customer requirements, comes from our target, right? So in our target, we said we're going to reduce it by this much and by a certain date. So at that date, we want to go back and check and say, did we hit our target? Same key there, circle, triangle, X. One could be 135, could be whatever you want. But that's our indication of, did we solve this problem? Did we meet our target? Did the solution we put in place permanently solve this problem? Now, in the case study, it was a circle. That's great. You can move on. In real life, a lot of times you'll get a red X or an orange triangle or a 3 or whatever. You might not solve it satisfactorily. So what do? Well, a lot of times it's tempting to just leave it and say, well, I tried. It's good enough. I'll move on. But in good problem solving, if we don't get good results, we need to go back and figure out what we missed. Did we not implement our countermeasures right? Were they bad countermeasures that we came up with? We didn't actually really solve the problem? Was our root cause wrong? Did we miss something? Did we not break the problem down right? What did we miss? Because every problem can be solved, and if we don't get good results, it means that we missed something, and we need to go back and fix it and address it and fix this problem before moving on to something else. That's how we can start extinguishing those fires and really make progress in terms of being able to solve things and improve the condition of the organization. So that's a key thought and a critical step. That's why we check the results here. We don't just assume it's good and throw it over the wall and wash our hands of it. And so after you've checked your results, once you've kind of gone through that iterative cycle and you've ensured that you've got good results, we're ready to move on to the last step, and that's standardizing. We'll cover that in the last bit of reading, and then we'll go ahead and pull up that last page for step 8. Pardon me. And pulling it up, and really the standardization plan, this is kind of like bonus points, really is maybe the best way to think about it, because once we confirmed we had good results, great, the problem solved, we can move on to something else. So why do this step 8? And what this standardization plan really is we want to think about ways we can share what we've learned, the solutions we came up with other people in the organization that can benefit from it. Because we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where every individual person or team or group or department has to solve the same problem over and over and over on their own, when we could just share the solution and save everybody the trouble and the hassle, right? Because now we turn the whole organization into problem solvers, and once we're sharing those results, we can level the whole organization up much faster than making this department do it on their own and that group do it on their own, right? So that standardization plan then is just a notes plan, however you want to document it out, of who could benefit from this and what we're going to do to share it with them. So from the case study, the area manager decided he was going to share this by going over it with the other managers at a meeting, walking them through the results, showing them the new processes, and then spending some time cross-training the other managers and the people so that they could transition that into other areas. Excuse me. And so once you have that plan done, then like with everything else, we want to have a target to complete by, and then the date that this was finished, so that we can go back, we can be accountable, and we're making sure that we're following through on our commitments. So those are the 8 steps done in the breakdown pages. And what we want to do is, in real life, we want to put all this stuff together when we're doing it, out on the factory floor, the shop floor, in the office. We don't want to use all these different pieces of paper and have 100 sheets flying everywhere. We want to have it all in one cohesive place that we can work off of, that we can share with, that we can use to tell that problem-solving story. And so that's what this A3 document does. It puts all of the breakdown pages into one place, kind of one cohesive document. And outside of just being a good placeholder for notes and a good way to walk through those 8 steps to make sure that we're using good problem solving, it has a couple other kind of big benefits from an organizational standpoint, from a management standpoint. The number one thing is it tracks our problem solving progress. So if I'm a manager or I'm a team leader and I've got 4 or 5 people working on different problems, well, now I have records of where everybody is. If I'm working on 4 or 5 of my own problems, say I got to set something aside and I got to check the results on it 4 months later, well, now I have a record of what I did, what I was thinking, and exactly what I'm looking for. I don't have to rely on this or an old email, right? It's good information to have. It keeps it fresh. It's a good organizational tool. The other thing in terms of managing our problem-solving efforts, now you can see what everybody's working on, so we can move resources around, we can get people help when they need it, we understand what everyone is working on, and we can be smarter about how we're using our resources. The next one for sharing that problem-solving experience, this is actually pretty important in practice because this is an acquired skill like anything else, like riding a bicycle. So having a document where you can tell that problem-solving story in terms of being a training tool or getting other people involved when you need help or when you've got to move outside your department maybe to get someone to help you implement a countermeasure, having the ability to tell that story in a cohesive way with something people can look at and understand your thinking is an invaluable asset in terms of team building, cooperation, and training. And then the last bullet down there is in being able to confirm good problem-solving activity. So what that really means is now we have a written record of what we're doing. We can see what our team members are working on, what they're thinking. It's a coaching tool. It's a training tool, as we just discussed. But then it's also a good way to be accountable to each other. Did we get all the way through? Did we get to a solution? Did something get left halfway open, right? It's visible now. We can see what we're doing, and when we can see it, now we can make sure that we're being accountable, which is one of the biggest hurdles in a lot of cases that organizations have to get over. So this is a good tool to help in a lot of different respects. And so what we'll do real quick is we'll just walk through how you put those breakdown pages together on this big A3. And everything we go through is going to look really familiar. I'll let you know up front. So the first thing we want to do is we want to start, name, job title, department, just so we know who it is. Fill out that cause or the general problem up there. Then we'll move to step 1, clarifying it. Pick our overall goal. How does it relate? What's our ideal and current situations? What's our gap? Throw in any notes that we've got. Then once we got the gap, let's break that gap down. All right, what are all the things that are contributing to it? Let's investigate, crash off the things that aren't working. Let's find the things that are contributing to it and break that down further. All right, now that we've got that, let's prioritize the problem we're going to work on and why. Then let's break that problem process down. What are the individual elements that are going on in that problem process? Then let's identify the individual step, that element where the defect is coming from because we went and saw and could see it happening. And that gives us the cause of our general problem. This is the problem that we're going to work on solving, this piece that we can get our hands around. So let's set our target. Now, does our target and that cause of the general problem, do they relate back to our gap? If we meet our target, will that close our gap? If yes, all right, we're good, we can move on. If not, we got lost. We need to figure out what happened. So from then on, we can move into step 4, our root cause analysis. Now, just like with everything else, this is just a sample template. So, not all problems in the world are going to fit on this nice and pretty. So, even just in this case study, maybe you have to add a little footnote or write somewhere in the margin. That's okay. This is just to guide your thinking and to get everyone using a standard format so we can kind of standardize the way we solve problems and communicate problem solving. So we want to ask ourselves why. Same thing, investigate, cross off the things that aren't working. Let's do that 5 why analysis and get down here to our real root cause. Again, in the case where you have a couple potential root causes, we want to prioritize the one that we want to chase. In this case, it was the scope of control issue. And let's figure out what our root cause is here. Now, we want to ask ourselves, is this root cause related to our general problem up in the box above? In this case, yep, so we can move forward. If it wasn't, we missed something, we'd have to go back. And the reason I keep stressing, double check, double check, double check, double check, it's because like we discussed in the results section, you don't want to get all the way to the end of this a month later and realize you got bad results because you made a mistake somewhere in here that you could have caught while you were doing it. So that's why it's important to double check your work. But once we've got that squared away, we can go ahead and brainstorm out our countermeasures. Again, working as a group individually. Once we've done that, it completes the first page. So we'll pull up the second page, copy our countermeasures over, and then we'll do that evaluation. We're going to find out which countermeasures actually make the most sense for us to follow through on. Once we do that, let's evaluate them, assign the ones that we're going to pursue, assign them to someone to complete, and then move on to writing up our implementation plan. Lay the steps out that we've got to go through to implement it. Who's going to be responsible for those steps? We'll throw in our targets for when we want to complete each step, and then we'll use it as a living document so we can visually see status ahead or behind. We'll follow it all the way through. Then once they're implemented, we're going to find out what result we want to check, when we want to check it, and then check and see how we did. Again, in this case, we had good results, we could move on. If you didn't get good results, kind of got to go back and figure out what we missed, because it's important that we always follow through to get good results. Otherwise, we're not actually solving problems. And then we want to move on to step 8. Once we got good results, who can we share what we learned with? How can this benefit other areas of the organization? Let's write out our plan for how we're going to do it, give ourselves a target, and give the date that we completed it. And then we're done. So it's pretty straightforward. It looks pretty familiar. Again, that's why we use the breakdown pages. It kind of makes it easier to just digest a piece at a time, and then it makes a lot more sense when we put it all together in the full A3. So for just a quick review then of what we went through in this and the previous sections, the main goals here, these individual steps. The first thing we want to do is that containment plan, and the reason is we want to stop shipping defects immediately while we're solving the problem over here on the side, because if we don't contain it first, say it takes us 3 days to actually solve the problem, well, now we just shipped however many bad product that we could have done something about. So that's why we want to contain it first. Then we want to clarify it. Let's figure out that gap. Let's quantify it. What are we trying to do here? Then break that gap down. Let's prioritize the biggest, best piece to solve. We'll set our target. What do we think we're going to do? Let's find the root cause, what's really causing this. Set up our countermeasures. Put them in place. Then we're going to confirm those results. Did we meet our target? Are we satisfied with where we are? If yes, then let's standardize it to make sure we're getting the most out of the effort that we put into solving this problem by giving everyone else the added benefit of what we just learned. So, that's kind of working through that case study again. It's just a physical example to give everyone a little bit of a feel, kind of a hands-on feel for what this looks like in real situations. Again, it is a learned skill, so it's something you got to practice, you got to stay up on, and the more you get used to it, the easier it gets. Again, with the documents, they're just used as templates to build off of, but I encourage everybody to change it, tweak it, however it suits your organization best. Really what's important is the thinking, and then the making sure that we're following through. Those are kind of the 2 big aspects. So, the next section that comes up for this, we'll talk a little bit about how we actually can integrate this type of problem solving systemically, into the organization. So that's what we'll cover in the next section. As always, any questions, direct them through the website, and we'll see everybody next time. Thanks.